This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Riverside, and it's a little ironic that we're talking about Final Cut Pro today because this is the first episode of the podcast that was cut with Riverside's AI tools. More about that later. It's great to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
I don't remember if we were doing video before this, but we are now, which I love and is very relevant to the topic today. For anybody that hasn't heard Thomas talk before, Thomas Grove Carter is one of the just absolute best Final Cut editors in the world. I've learned a lot of my workflows from him. So if you've watched some of my tutorials, I'm stealing some of his tricks. And every time I talk to him, I learn something new about both Final Cut and editing video in general. That's what we're going to talk about today, especially because there's a very special occasion. We've got a whole new round number version of Final Cut Pro. So that's been very exciting. And Thomas, from what I know, you've played a little part in the announcement of it as well. I guess, could you tell me about that?
Yeah, I helped in making the kind of like launch. I don't know how it's going to be branded, but like the launch video, talking about the features and stuff. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like the way Apple does those mini trailers that really hype up the new thing. And it reminded me of seeing the way that you've done tutorials as well. Like you've done an Instagram page and just like these little micro tutorials about specific features. And it's quite the feat to make tiny software features look epic. So you've edited it in a way that does. So
yeah, that was kind of the idea from why I wanted to get involved with that. It was taking those tutorials that I'd done and what I'd learned from making those and kind of bringing that kind of storytelling or whatever to like on a bigger scale, basically.
Yeah. No, it got me excited, but it definitely means that you also are pretty aware of what these new features are, how they work. I have definitely spent less time with Final Cut 11 than you have. At this point, I've just tried the new features. I've just kind of seen them at play, but I don't think I'm ready to evaluate them yet because it's still definitely fresh. First of all, one of the first questions I had when I was kind of learning about this app was like, why 11 now? Like this is a set of, first of all, let's just say what those features are. The biggest flagships are we've got Magic Mask, which is similar to, I guess, what is that called? And what does Resolve call it? I forget.
I don't know, but it's like similar to the Roto AI kind of plugin as well, isn't it? You get from Motion VFX.
In Final Cut Pro, Motion VFX is the one that I've been using. That it's called Roto AI, and it's AI rotoscoping is what the feature does, and now it's built into Final Cut. So that is a huge feature. I mean, very helpful, very powerful. We'll talk about why. And then they've also done AI captions, automated captions, which is much requested, and along with a bunch of other little things. Let's take a quick break to talk about Riverside, the sponsor of this episode. Now, not only did I use Riverside, as I always do, to actually record the episode, so this is how my guest logs in, and we just stream back and forth, and it records the call locally on their machine and mine, uploads all of that to the cloud in full quality, and I can edit it later. Now, up until now, I was just downloading those full resolution files and editing them in Final Cut Pro, and that worked great, but took quite a bit of time. I'd have to listen to the full episode before I could finish it. And it took, longer than the recording because I'd have to go through it slowly and cut back and forth, telling the camera when to show me and my guest and both of us. Now their AI tools do all of that editing for us. So it can do things like ducking, which removes the audio from one of the speakers when they're not talking so that you're only hearing the active speaker at a time. And what I love the most is the automatic switching that goes back and forth between the two of us, and now can also have a 2-camera showing both speakers at the same time. And this is really valuable to me for a podcast. Like, I don't think it's great when you either just see one speaker for the whole episode or you just see both of them. I want that cutting back and forth. And Riverside did an amazing job of being intelligent about when to do that. And you can see it because this whole episode was cut using Riverside's AI tools. I didn't have to manually intervene at all. Really amazing. This is by far the least amount of time I spent editing an episode of the podcast. So if you want to check out Riverside and see how they can speed up your process, head to the link in the description or the show notes. Thanks again to Riverside for supporting the show. Why do you think this is version 11? Like, those are great features, but it's not a complete redesign, and we've been sitting at Final Cut 10 for more than 10 years now.
Yeah, maybe
So
13 years. I think probably all titles, numbers, names probably are all marketing terms, really, when you get right down to the base level of it. And so I think really what they're saying with this is that it signals like a continued investment, a new era for the app. Like you're saying, like it's not a new look Final Cut. It's not a new. There's loads of great new features. But yeah, it could have been any number, I suppose. But I think it's probably just signaling that they're continuing to invest in it, continuing to build on what they've already got. Because we're on, it's been branded as Final Cut 10 for 13 years now, I think, which is a year longer than the original Final Cut was around.
Wow.
And so, and I wonder whether there's like a segment of people out there who don't use Final Cut, who still see it as Final Cut 10 is what it was when it came out 13 years ago, which a lot of people weren't happy with. And I think this maybe just gives people an opportunity to give another look. And I think maybe just that sort of signaling a new era maybe is more what it does.
Yeah. Well, and I know that the general impression of, let's say like Apple pundits, people that understand the tech world, but they don't edit video specifically. I've seen this conversation a few times where their impression of where Final Cut sits in the marketplace is like, it's not really used. It's like, it's a total side project and, total people that are deep into Apple fans will occasionally use it, but it's not as professional. It can't be used in bigger projects. And I think there's still a pretty wide perception that it's sort of dead in a way that it clearly isn't for people like you and me that are in the community and sort of seeing the use cases. And for me, I mean, especially creators, there's a lot of really many big creators are still completely on Final Cut. And the reason I really stick to it, even though I'm often tempted away to Resolve, there's a lot going on in Resolve land that is exactly what I want, but it is always the fastest place to edit. And when I say edit, I mean like put clips one after the other, tell a story from the original footage that you have. It may not have all the bells and whistles in finishing the footage, putting a final layer of effects or color grading or that's kind of where it's still missing some of the big features that we see other places, but you can just tell a story faster than anything else. And so for me, a lot of our commercial work now is social media, and we have one contract for 120 social media videos a year they're all like, vertical commercials. And that's a lot of output. And I would not want to edit that in anything other than Final Cut. So, it definitely still has its place. And like you say, I think this is Apple's signal that like it's still here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using it for, I guess, around 10 years, maybe a little less than that, for all my professional work in commercials and music videos and stuff. And it's always been great in that because, like you say, it is still the fastest way to edit. And I'm not doing any of the finishing on my stuff. So we're working with professional colorists and VFX houses and, all the big places where we send it off to. So, but I'm still able to edit as fast as I can possibly edit in Final Cut than I can in any other app. And even if you've got the time, even if you've got a lot of time to edit something, getting in a creative flow and getting ideas down and changing things quickly just gives you more time to do more creative stuff, I think. So that's why I still use it and why I still can't see myself switching. I think particularly the way Magnetic Timeline works, I can do really complex audio and sound design when I'm changing up the timeline, swapping things around, like even just, tightening everything up. Everything is as I want it to be, is kind of, it's a hard thing to describe until you know how that timeline works. Because I know that everyone who's ever switched to Final Cut or tried switching, until that magnetic timeline clicks for them, it feels like a nightmare. It doesn't really work.
Yeah. It's the biggest stumbling block, and then what you get addicted to later as well.
Yeah, like one of the owners of the company I work at, he's sort of one of the biggest commercial editors. He had been on Avid for 15 years more, and he's actually I didn't think he ever would, but he's finally switched over to Final Cut as well, because he can work way faster. He can do more rough effects than he can in Avid, and Yeah, it's interesting watch experienced editors. They find it hard to. An experienced editor finds it harder to pick up Final Cut, I think, than someone who's never edited before. We get young people coming in as assistants, and they pick up Final Cut like it's obvious it would work like this to them.
And I still really appreciate that in a complex project, when you do have something that is much longer and there's a lot going on, it's harder to break the project. Like, back when I spent a lot more time in Premiere, I'd often do something in the first 2 minutes of the video, and that has some knock-on effect further down. Like, I could more easily let everything sort of collapse because you deleted a clip you didn't realize and shuffled something else, and now you've got a gap down along the line. And I just find Final Cut wants to close the project. Like, it's closing those gaps for you, so you end up destroying your project less often. Like, it stays intact a lot more easily. So, but I mean, yeah, we could go on forever about why we use it. But let's talk about what's new in it. Maybe I'll let you take the lead in terms of what are you the most excited about in Final Cut 11, and why, and how have you been using it?
Yeah, so I guess the first headline feature is the magnetic mask, which, like you said earlier, is like an AI enhanced roto tool. Basically,
did I call it the wrong thing earlier? Because
I think you called it. I think you called it magic.
Yeah, which is totally. would be a valid name too, but just need to acknowledge that now that I realize it.
Yeah, and I can see myself using it on almost all my projects. It's incredibly fast. It's incredibly accurate. Is it good do you want me to describe how it works?
Yeah, if you could. And I also just want to defend myself. Magic Mask is what it's called in Resolve. That's how I...
that's why... Okay, that makes sense.
It is, yeah. That is the name. Okay. So Magnetic Mask is where we are in Final Cut. But yeah, how do you use it? What does it do?
So really, there's two ways of applying it to a clip. You can just drag it from the effects browser and drag it straight onto your viewer. And as you do that, it will start analyzing the image. So if there's a person, it will highlight that person. If there's a car, whatever, if there's some rocks, as you drag it over the frame, it will analyze the things, and you can just drop it straight on and it will rotate that thing. Or you can just add it like a normal effect onto your clip, and then you get a little plus icon, and you can just click on things and it will use AI to kind of figure out what you want to mask. You can then plus or minus to add and remove bits if it's catching bits that you don't want to or not getting enough of something. I think there's also, I haven't used this as much, but you can switch it to a brush tool as well if you want to paint in areas that it hasn't caught. So if there's something that's, catching the light and not quite picked up. And then you can you click analyze and analyze forwards and backwards, and just creates a really, really good mask very, very quickly.
Yeah, and to me, this is one of those modern AI revolution features, especially in terms of photography. So when this was added to Lightroom, if you just look at my edits now, it's just covered in masks. It's like there'll be something on the subject, the background, and then using gradient layers to turn that off different parts of the subject and background. And the sky has its own mask, and basically everything has a mask at this point in my photography. And that's usually just to do little exposure tweaks, white balance tweaks. I'm not doing anything crazy in each one, but the fact that it's AI and I don't need to create the mask manually means I can go crazy with it, and I'll just throw little adjustments here and there and all over. We're not quite at that point with video because, it's even on a fast machine, it's going to take a minute to analyze and track the whole shot, go all the way backwards and forwards. So you need to be a little more, I think, cautious with it, and you're not going to put on layers and layers of it. But in terms of color adjustments, which is going to be a pretty common use for it, I really like it. It just means that you can raise or lower the exposure of your subject or background. And probably one of the most common uses for it right away is putting titles behind your subject, so that they become integrated into the scene. I love that effect. Obviously, I use it all the time, just like everyone else. But am I missing any really great use cases?
Well, what I was going to say was the way it really helps me is that before this, I would be doing a sort of draw mask, or manually doing it, manually keyframing it, and I would do a very, very rough job and sort of say, well, we'll do this better in post when we get to it and stuff. Or if I really wanted to look good, I might have to have an assistant do it while I'm working on other stuff. But this just makes it really like a no-brainer just to do it yourself. It's so fast, and then also because it's like a native first party feature is built into I think pretty much every effect it is built into. So if you put on a color correction, you can choose to add I almost called it magic again. So if you put on a color filter, you can choose to add a magnetic mask to that color filter. So you could select a person, just raise the levels on them, or any effect that you wanted to do. If you wanted to blur out a person's face, you could use a pixelate filter and use the mask on that. It's the fact that it's built in and native as first party is really great.
Yeah, it means everybody's going to use it and often. And so, the way I've been doing it is third party lately. Motion VFX has Roto AI, but that leans into one of the bigger downsides of Final Cut generally is that for a lot of these more advanced effects, you've needed third party plugins. And Roto AI is part of a subscription package that's quite expensive. And, I use a ton of Motion VFX stuff, but those the prices add up. All of a sudden you've spent more money. I think a lot of people that are into the plugin ecosystem have spent more money on their plugins than they ever did on Final Cut Pro itself, because the app it's quite inexpensive, right? So that has kind of been a downside, is like to build it up to the same place as Resolve, you can, but you need to buy all this third party stuff. So the more that is built in natively, like, it will absolutely help the average user take every project a lot further.
Yeah, and I've been using Roto AI as well, which is really great. But I think this feels more accurate, and it seems to analyze a lot faster. The other thing is that when I'm working on projects with multiple editors or a number of assistants passing things back and forth, then you've got to be sure that everyone's got the third-party plugin, or maybe we haven't got a license for everyone in the building and we need to turn it off and on, and then sharing projects between it sometimes gets a bit bogged down with Roto AI, and like once it's a first-party one, it's sort of guaranteed to be a bit more, much more stable and easier to use as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited about that. I mean, magnetic mask.
I don't know if you've had a chance as well, but there's the other thing you can do is you can add multiple sort of tracks within one mask effect.
Well, and I know this is small, but I love that it's different colors. Like, that actually is very helpful.
Yeah, because say you've got two people walking for a frame, you can track one of them, and then within the same effect, track the other person, and it tracks them as separate objects, which I assume makes the tracking better as well, because it's not trying to look for multiple things at a time. I don't know, but it feels, it's really nice that it's different colors as well.
Yeah, and it looks good in screenshots. If you're making a trailer for Final Cut 11, it makes it look cooler too.
Yeah.
What else do we got? The next biggest feature is probably captions, right?
Yeah, transcribed captions, which again is something that I feel like third parties have been doing for a little bit, and it's really great to have it built in natively. It's very fast. It's transcribed an hour-long clip in maybe 10 seconds, something like that. I'd have to test it. And I'm still using an M1 Max at the moment. I'm not on any of the new stuff. Yeah, that's extremely fast. Yeah. So it's like, you can transcribe stuff very fast, really accurately, and then it instantly is captions on your timeline. I think what a lot of people are going to... Oh, carry on.
Well, what I saw it doing is that it's using the captions feature, whereas most of the third-party tools have been using title features.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the impression that because, again, I didn't even dig into it, so I don't know if they changed the way that caption design works, but you have a lot more flexibility with the layout and the design of a title than you do a caption. Is that still the case, or are you a little restricted?
So the way captions work is I think captions are bound by sort of industry standards for closed captioning. I think that's what that is. So, they are, when you turn on subtitles on Netflix or different things, or, probably on... maybe even on YouTube and stuff like that, closed captioning, they fit that format. The real plus side of them within Final Cut, just using them, is that they're sort of attached to your clips. Even if they're connected clips, they will be attached to them. So even if you've got B-roll with a caption on it, wherever you move it, that caption will go. Also, there's like a really nice UI for when you double click a caption, it pops open a little window with the text in where you can edit it, and you can jump through captions very quickly with the arrows on either side. So it's quite nice for going through and editing that text. But it's not a title that has dynamic animation or like, unlimited fonts and colors and all that kind of thing. There is a third party, so I think it's Intelligent Assistants, I know, make a really good one that just instantly switches them into titles. So you can do that, but not currently as it is shipped.
Well, and yeah, this is one of those, the hope that Final Cut 11 means doubling down of commitment to Final Cut. This is hopefully part of it, like they're signaling that there will be more updates to come and they will develop further into this space. Because, I've also got to be harsh on Final Cut because I'm not loyal to any one program, but the fact that CapCut, a free application that runs on my phone and desktop, has been able to do an incredible job of this for quite a few years now. CapCut's always my frustration tool of like, I would never switch to it for pro work. And I actually find their subscription model now is so expensive that it's a bit prohibitive. But they've just had so much built in to, kind of a novelty TikTok app that I'm like, why can I do all of, like, why is this more powerful than Final Cut sometimes? Like, it really shouldn't be. And it is. And so, I really hope this doubling down is part of that, of bringing it both, I think somewhat in the direction of CapCut, because I do think some part of Final Cut's place is like as that speed editor, which resonates really well with social media production, anything that needs to get released really quickly, high volume work, all that kind of stuff. And then there's also some Resolve features that, I would love to see. Color management's always like top of my list so that I have a correct grading stack in a way that makes a little bit more sense than it does now. But hopefully this means it's all coming. I think this is the best sign we've seen from Apple and their Pro apps in a while. And actually, I'll take this as my opportunity to insert my conspiracy theory. Well, my prediction. I'm just gonna lay it on the line because who knows what will happen. And I imagine that this is part of a bigger picture, or I hope this is part of a bigger picture Pro app story for Apple. And the recent acquisition of Pixelmator and Photomator, maybe that's kind of part of it. I don't know anything at all, but I could see them being like, look, we're going to enter the new generation of creative apps coming from Apple. We're not going to rely entirely on third party anymore. And there will be a story for your video editing and your photo editing. Logic also already does an amazing job of audio. Like they actually don't need that much more to have a great first party complete creative suite. And this encourages me in the same way. So I also take this as a signal that I don't expect Pixelmator to be baked into the Photos app, because I've heard that a lot. People are like, oh, they're just going to strip it for parts and put it in Photos. I think that is so unlikely because the Photos app is pretty full. I mean, like it's a very busy app for the type of user that uses it, which is absolutely everybody. This app can never be Lightroom. We don't want that many features in Photos. So, yeah. I don't know. That's my guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love Pixel. I use Pixelmator and I love it as well.
Do you? Yeah.
It's kind of like, I just use it because I haven't had an Adobe subscription for a while. So, and I don't use Photoshop really very much. Use it those kind of features very rarely. So I've used it for ages and it feels like a Mac app already, like as in a native Mac app. So it feels like it fit in really well. And it'll be interesting to see where those kind of features go in. And like with this transcription thing as well, I don't know how much Apple Intelligence stuff has played into it, but there's a really good model they're using to make that transcription work, and it feels like a really important first step. And hopefully, it's going to go. I get the sense that it will go a lot further. Because really, for what I'd love is to be able to use transcription features like within the browser as well on source clips, to be able to search clips in the browser, like. Right now, I'm able to, do captions on the timeline on an hour-long interview and quickly search for lines. But if I could search, say, pull up all the lines that are, all the lines, all the different line reads of a scene or something.
Yeah.
Like right now, I can, in the same way that now I can bring up all my favorites for, there's just amazing ways to sort and view your footage. I feel like that's going to be the next thing, whether it's text-based editing or whether it's just searching your browser.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think a lot of Resolve and Premiere editors are like, well, where's the text-based editing? Like that's our future, and you guys are living in the past. And right now, I don't think that's quite true. I don't think a lot of people are primarily doing text-based editing, but it's going to become essential at some point. Like once enough editors are just used to leaning on that feature, I think not having it will frustrate Final Cut editors. So hopefully,
it's also interesting. It's interesting that the two big features you point to wanting, one was would be more like a sort of prosumer side, and the other side is very hardcore professional side. So I think Final Cut does straddle like got an interesting place where it pulls in users from all sides.
Yeah, and which I really appreciate. Like I think it's great that you can start learning on the easy app and then finish learning on the easy app. You don't have to Resolve is intimidating. Like it's great, but when people are just getting started, it's a lot. So what else? I guess what else was in there? I don't want to go too in detail on every single feature, but like what might I have missed? I mean, spatial video is probably the big sort of headline feature from Apple's side. I think I've had a demo in an Apple store of a Vision Pro, which was pretty cool. But I haven't got it. I haven't made anything for spatial video yet. But it's great that that stuff's incorporated into it. It's got to be at some point. So I'm glad that it's happening. The last episode, it's been a little while since I posted the podcast, and the last episode was specifically about the Vision Pro. And, I mentioned in there that to me, spatial is way less interesting than immersive. It's not that exciting. And what Apple is doing with their AI spatial, I've already seen it with the photos. Like you can just load up any old photo on the Vision Pro, tap spatial, and AI maps what it expects the distances between objects to be, and does just a perfect job. It's amazing. It is it's a really great way to experience photos, and it's doing as good. To my eye, a photo shot on my full frame mirrorless looks way better with spatial than something I shot on my iPhone natively in spatial. And right now, all of the spatial cameras at a prosumer level are sort of compromised in terms of image quality because you're splitting the sensor in half. You only have the one lens, really. It's like you're stuck on a wide angle lens. It's not going to have much depth of field. Whereas using the AI version of spatial, you can just shoot with absolutely anything you've got, and it's going to separate it. So I've kind of heard that's happening with video. I know it's not released yet, but like, I don't know. If we get there where it can be automated, I'm like, well, why would I shoot it anyway? So I know there are people out there that this will matter to, but I'm still kind of looking forward to the fully automated version of this for most editors that aren't doing it at a pro level.
Yeah. I think with the, it's obviously billed as a spatial video Vision Pro type feature that you can edit in Final Cut, but it does just mean that you can edit 3D video in Final Cut natively.
Right.
So I know that's not a massive thing right at all, maybe anymore. Maybe it was there was a big spike 10 years ago.
But you can, because when you're previewing it, you can do the red-blue split as a preview of the 3D. You can wear normal 3D glasses, red and blue glasses, and watch on your normal Mac display and use traditional 1950s 3D if you want. So that's kind of fun.
That's cool.
Any other little things? What else?
Well, I think there's like a whole bunch of... There's like these few headline features we've just talked about. Then there's a lot of like really nice improvements and general things all around. Like you're always going to get bug fixes. You're always going to get speed improvements and things. But there's one particular one that I really like, which is, I'm not sure what it's called, but you can nudge clips up and down in the order in the timelines. You could so you've got 3-4 titles. You can select one of them and you hold, I think it's option, and then up and down, and you can just move it up and down in your timeline. Rather than, currently you would grab it with the mouse and drag it up and down. Maybe you'd hold shift to try and lock it into place so it doesn't slip in time.
If it's attached to the wrong clip, you maybe can't move it where you're expecting as well. Like it can get pretty clunky to move it up and down depending on how the stack is prepared.
Yeah, if you've got another clip close by, it might snap to the beginning of that. If you've got connected storylines, sometimes things will jump into the connected storyline. This just means I've been using it all the time with audio, and it's almost my favorite feature. It's almost my favorite feature in the release, I think, because it's become so natural to use that now to move clips or groups of clips. You can grab as many clips as you want and move a whole bunch of them up and down. Really nice. There's another one which is like hiding a hide clips feature. So when you create a synchronized clip or a multicam clip, you can have it automatically hide the source clips. So it doesn't reject them. It just sort of hides them from your view. And then there's always a toggle button to show hidden clips, and they'll reappear, and they've got the thumbnails have like a little eye with a cross through it, so you know that those are hidden clips. Where I've been using that is that
it makes a lot of sense. Like every time you do a multicam, it's like, well, now I don't care about the individual clips anymore. They're dead to me. So let me ignore them. But of course, they're still in the project because they're part of the multicam. So
a way I think I'm going to use it probably is like when I've got they've done 10 takes on something, and then they'll shoot a plate, or they'll shoot a color card and a sort of mirror ball for VFX stuff. I don't want to see those empty plates or the mirror balls, but I don't want to get rid of them either. And when you reject them, if your view is set to hide rejected, you're not seeing the clips or bits of clips you've rejected. So now you can just hide, you can click hide clips, and I know that those are sort of hidden away, and I can always get back to them if I need to. That's a really nice little feature.
Yeah, I love that.
Another one is there's another really nice little one in the browser, just for navigating metadata fields in the browser. You can use, like, say you're renaming a clip or a load of clips. Normally you would have to like select the next clip, like go in to edit the text, highlight it and change it. Now you can press, I think it's, what is the shortcut?
Follow Thomas to find out.
And when you're editing some text in the browser, if you just press Option up and down, it will jump to the next clip and will already have it highlighted, so you can just carry on typing. So if you're appending numbers to the end of a clip or something, you can just really quickly jump through, and then you can use Tab or Shift Tab to jump through other editable fields. Like if you wanted to fill out a load of take information or slate information, you could. Yeah, it's just very, very really nice little feature that will just makes it quicker and easier to. Yeah,
and it is a lot of those shortcuts and those like quality of life features that make me prefer Final Cut. It's just like moving through footage is what's faster.
There's also there's a load of other features that have been hidden away in menus that have now got I can't remember the whole list of them, but they've now got default keyboard shortcuts and things. So a few things that you could only do by digging into a window and clicking on a menu, those are now they're there in keyboards and available to.
Well, and I really hope you'll make some more tutorials at some point. I know you've slowed down, but everybody should follow Thomas Grove Carter on all social media to encourage him to make more, because they're very helpful. There's obviously some big announcements as well in terms of all the other Final Cuts. Let's hit iPad first, because I think it'll be pretty quick, because even though, I did a launch video kind of going through it and all of the functionality in it, there have been some big improvements, but I'm just not really using it. And it's not at all because of the app design. It's actually more about like storage workflows. It's never made sense for me to like, where am I putting the footage that it's quicker to edit it on the iPad than a laptop? So I just haven't found that use case. But the fact that they're, making some pretty big updates is great. I want it to get better, because I could see there being some narrow use cases in the future. And the best thing they did on Final Cut for iPad that I'm pretty positive did not come to the desktop is being able to break out the viewer window for vertical editing. So now your viewer can just like float around, you position it anywhere. And for vertical editors, that's amazing. I mean, it means your timeline can kind of sit anywhere. It's much more flexible of a windowing system than what we currently have. And I didn't see anywhere to do that on the desktop. I'm not missing it, am I?
No, I think you can. I mean, you can obviously have a vertical viewer, but it'll always be above the timeline. What would be great is if you could, even if you couldn't pop out, if you could just have it go top to bottom and have the timeline to the left of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Nice.
Yeah, with the iPad one as well, it's. I think that I haven't found a place for it in my workflow at all, because people are shooting on Alexas and stuff like that, and then occasionally, be Assistant will load it, or at some point, I think you can send something from Final Cut from iPad to the Mac, but I don't know that at the moment there's a way you can sort of go back and forth. So by the time an assistant's already started building up my project, I'm already on the Mac, but it does look great.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. So, well, I think the features that I'll use more often are in Final Cut Camera, which also got some kind of essential updates that I really appreciate. I've done videos recently about how I'm shooting with my iPhone, and I'm still mostly using Blackmagic camera because it's the most like a real camera. And there's also just a lot of missing features from Final Cut Camera previously, and now we've got some essential ones. So the biggest thing, this basically will let me use it because I was only using Blackmagic before, is you can only shoot in ProRes 422 HQ, which those files are just too big for normal person use. And now they do have an H.265 option inside of Final Cut Camera. Interestingly, it's only 1 bit rate. So Apple's like, this is the one you need, which is kind of helpful too, because before in Blackmagic, they actually, the default they had was not a high enough bit rate, and they just didn't talk about it. It was like, here's an H.265 option, but it will fall apart in log, and they don't warn you. So now there is a high bitrate option in Blackmagic, and it's actually about, their high bitrate is about double what Apple has as their default H.265. So I found that kind of interesting. It's like Apple didn't max it out. They didn't crank it up to 11 in terms of potential file size. Their, what they deem enough to color grade with for Apple log is, kind of moderate, which is great and kind of gives me a little bit of reassurance about, okay, this is my target bit rate to get the maximum quality out of the iPhone. Yeah. So yeah, that's been helpful.
Have you used the sort of multicam feature at all? You can shoot on multiple iPhones, right?
Mixing with
in Final Cut Camera.
Yeah. I did it when it came out, and I ran into a few little hiccups here and there. And actually, the biggest reason I'm not using it regularly is the lack of vertical support. So I thought at first, I was like, I'm going to use this on set for all these vertical commercials I'm shooting. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I can't rotate it. So I would have to literally just turn my iPad on its side, and all the interfaces would be sideways, and it would record horizontal videos that I'd have to rotate later. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's the thing, is like the main use case for iPhone production for me is that it's going to be for social media first. That means it's vertical, so I need full vertical support. And it's just really weird to me. Blackmagic has this issue too. If you're shooting, you can use another phone as a monitor and a remote control for Blackmagic Camera. So it's just like everything's being managed on another iPad, another iPhone. Amazing. It only works in horizontal. Like I don't know. I don't get why. It's strange to me, but maybe someday.
I wonder if maybe if you just put vertical in there, it feels like it doesn't signal itself as pro.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I still wonder, like, am I early to a trend? Because it seems to me obvious that there will be a lot of vertical commercials that are shot natively vertical, and an iPhone is a great place for that. So is that going to be something that everybody's doing soon? Seems like it to me. Or will I just stay the odd one out that, I don't know. It seems clear.
I think you're probably ahead of it.
But yeah.
I think you're probably ahead of it. On a lot of big commercials I do, they will shoot square now with a 9:16 crop, like, but it gives you that extra headroom. Yeah, but it gives you the extra headroom. But no one's really fully thinking about the 9:16 version, even though it's probably one of the.
It's always a compromise layout.
It might be the bigger deliverable for the client at the end of it. Yeah,
that's part of what drives me crazy a lot of the times. Obviously, not every project, but there are many projects where the reason that the horizontal version gets the attention is because filmmakers prefer it. And I get why, right? Like, we come from the cinema world. We want to be making movies. Even if it is a commercial, we're like, I want this to feel like a movie. And the thing is, the vertical one might be viewed by 10 times as many people someday, but all the focus is on the horizontal because that's what the filmmaker that is shooting the commercial cares about more. And the truth is, you can only optimize one of those ratios at a time, really. You are always, either you're trading off one or the other, or you're trading off both. So, for us, we're actually just shooting it purely vertical. There isn't a horizontal version of a lot of these. Or actually, on a recent project we just did, so we're doing a series of hotels, and we're shooting stills and horizontal video and vertical video, and we're shooting them all separately because we want the social posts to look like they're social. So the horizontal videos are being shot on a full frame mirrorless, and the vertical is being shot on the phone because it just feels native to each platform. So that's why we make that choice. It takes a little longer to shoot. Are you shooting
them on the same rig, or are you shooting things twice?
No. Yeah, we shoot it twice, which is its own pain. I have done things on the same rig. So for an example in that project was there's a video about like how to use the coffee maker in your room. And we shot that one time with 2 cameras rigged up because that just kind of made sense. But, once you're on a gimbal, once the camera's moving, that's when it gets tricky to compose 2 cameras on the same rig. It's a little messy. So
it seems like a funny thing to fight. I understand the urge not for people to want to have vertical video when they're, we're coming from a film world. But as an end user of like a phone and looking at being shown commercials or being shown things, if you're viewing it vertically, it doesn't look as good if it's been badly cropped. You can tell. Or you can tell when someone's done a transform to like keep things in frame, and there's weird motion blur that shouldn't be there. Yeah.
Well, or it's often what I see as well is that like the vertical crop has just like blurry background with no context, whereas what you want on like a phone video is like you see everything's in focus. Everything's wide, like shots are always wider. You don't want compression and blur and bokeh and stuff. Like the phone language is to show everything, and you don't get that on an Alexa LF at 50 millimeters.
Yeah.
So, but those are the biggest things for Final Cut. But I do want to touch on some of the other new things that have happened lately, especially the new M4 Max, which I've been testing. Just before we go there, I just want to touch on like sort of the state of NLEs in general. Obviously, there's a lot of them out there. We did one very successful video a long time ago. A lot of people watched it, comparing Final Cut Pro versus Resolve versus Premiere. No, wait. Did I not include Resolve back then? I think I skipped Resolve because it hadn't quite arrived. But now it has definitely arrived. What's your take on the sort of distribution of how people are using things, or just where are we in relationship to these different editors?
I mean, in terms of, I think they're all pretty amazing. And what you can do in all, like you talking about CapCut, people getting into it with CapCut, Premiere doing sort of amazing stuff, Resolve, it's great seeing Resolve doing, continuing to grow and build, I think. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel really mean, but I don't know what to say about Avid because it's probably, I feel like that's just in the same place as it's ever been. No, but I think the reason I say that about Resolve is that I feel like Resolve works for people who are comfortable with the way Avid works as well. So I think it's great to have like a modern code base and a modern features serving that sort of editing metaphor. That's really good.
I think I could also be satisfied with a lot of my Final Cut needs if a really direct pipeline back and forth between Final Cut and Resolve. Obviously, you can move XML, like you can move XML back and forth. It works. That's, I'm sure, what you're doing sometimes is, you just hand off the edit. Here's the edit instructions, and the people finishing it just take it into whatever they're going to use. But it's not for a single user, like for somebody like me, it's not a great workflow. If I could easily move back and forth between them without having to do picture lock, for example, and just have a more direct relationship, like I could let Resolve is my color app and Final Cut is my editing app, and that relationship would actually be great. You need to have time to do that back and forth right now that I don't have. So
yeah, because it does a lot of things translate really well, but I think the way they treat multicam and compound clips and things,
slow motion, I've ran into a lot of.
Yeah, they kind of. Yeah, they treat them in a slightly different way, which is maybe that's always going to be an issue because they have different technical ways they achieve them and different philosophies for how they work. Yeah, but no, I think like the state of NLEs in general is great. I think the whole, all the different worlds that different people use.
And I've seen such great optimization across all of them now. I mean, Resolve especially is really well. The code clearly works great on a Mac. It generally runs about as fast as Final Cut does now, and I hear less complaints from the Premiere side. But I'm not opening it anymore, so I don't personally know if it's crashing less. But
yeah, it does seem like it works a lot. It has picked up a lot of speed gains from the Apple Silicon era now as well, which I wasn't confident it would, but it has. But yeah, Resolve is kind of in lockstep speed wise with Final Cut. I think. I don't know if they're using the same underlying sort of file management or decoding and stuff.
Speaking of the M series chips, we've got new ones, and so I've been testing the M4 Max. I've put out a video with kind of all my benchmarks and doing like kind of my usual workflows in both photo and video. And I don't know. Well, first of all, like kind of what do you do your main editing on? Like what's your daily driver machine?
I'm on an M1 Max 14-inch laptop, which I've been on since around when they came out.
Amazing.
Because I'm split at the moment. I'm at my home office, but I split my time between home and our edit suites in town. So because I'm moving back and forth, I did have at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a Mac Pro here at home, but once I started moving back and forth again, it's just been so much easier to move a machine. Have my laptop. And if I occasionally need to open, I barely use it as an actual laptop. It literally sits, which is why I went with the 14-inch as well, because most of the time it's completely closed, so it doesn't matter what size the screen is. And if I'm actually going to use it as a laptop, it's on my lap, so it's more comfortable having the smaller one. But like the M1 Max has been amazing, and it's still feeling really great. But having watched your video and a couple of other videos, it is. I feel like the M4.
We've finally seen a real jump, yeah.
Yeah, which, and I don't think that's a negative for how they've been going, because every year there's been like a 20-25% increase, which is great, because
that's I don't really,
you shouldn't be. No one should be buying a new laptop every year anyway. My general thing is they last 4 to 5 years normally, I think, roughly. So, but this time, like the speed jumps seem pretty amazing. When you see that it's kind of coming close against the benchmarks on the M2 Ultra, which is an incredible chip. It's amazing.
I think something interesting that people not working in the industry don't understand is as things get more pro, because like like we keep saying, like in your world, you're spending less time on the finishing steps. Your demands for your machine are actually not as high as somebody that needs to do the whole shebang, right? Like you're not doing the final export, so export times aren't part of your workflow, and you're not adding film grain inhalation, and so I think often people like kind of misunderstand that idea of like if somebody's professional, they have this set of needs, and it's like it totally depends exactly where you sit in the steps along the way of like when do you need to push your computer hard, and so even for me as well, like most of the time that I spend working on a project, I'm not at that bleeding edge of the capabilities of the computer. I'm just living at something that the M1s can handle easily. It's only the last step that it really starts to go hard. But I think we're about to enter an area where we will push it more because of these AI features. So if you've got a magnetic mask and you're like running them on every clip, and you're using the AI slow motion, which we almost should talk about, because I feel like that was a quiet release. That would actually fit well as a Final Cut 11 release. It almost should have all been one big package. But when you're doing all that more often, then you'll need the powers, is all I was saying.
Yeah, and I like, because on the kind of commercials that do big high-end things, we counterintuitively are often using 1080 ProRes proxy files, because they'll be shooting on set on a massive camera, and they'll be sending us to them over the internet. So it doesn't make sense to be sending big 4K or 8K files. So we're often working with smaller file sizes anyway. So yeah, it's going to be more about those effects and that kind of thing. Actually, one of the other editors I work with is currently using an M2 MacBook Air as his work machine on massive commercials that everyone will have seen, because he loves the design of it. It keeps up fairly well with everything, and he just chucks it in his bag and moves between home and the office, and it's great.
Absolutely.
But yeah, on this, the M4 laptops seem amazing. I'm really interested to see about the nano texture screen as well, because it kind of looks amazing from demos.
If it's like professional enough. I was very surprised how many people are like, well, the contrast ratio is going to suffer and are the colors as accurate? And they're kind of asking, I don't think people were trying to tell me it's bad, but it was clear to me there is a perception out there that the nano texture is like, it's not quite as, you can't trust it in the same way that you can trust glossy. I don't know if you've used nano texture anywhere, but like, do you have any thoughts on that before I share mine?
So the only nano texture I've seen the nano texture on I've got a Pro Display glossy. I've seen the nano texture on a Pro Display, and it always looked incredible. But it obviously looks slightly different to how it looks. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an option if it looked identical. So my perception of that was that it was the best matte screen I'd ever seen. And I'd be interested to, because that's been like at least 5 years now. I'd be interested to see how that's moved forward or changed. Yeah,
I think it probably looks pretty similar to what you saw, which was excellent. Like it really looks great. And there is a reduction of contrast when the nanotexture is kind of being used. Like if you've got a lot of diffused light in the room, it'll lose contrast in a different way than glossy would. Because the thing is, in glossy, like you are also losing contrast because there are reflections, but they're hard reflections, and you can sort of focus your eyes past them in a way, and the black behind them is still blacker. But when it's being diffused, you're seeing past those reflections by like the whole screen is a slightly raised level of black, but you can see that screen very clearly. So if you're in a controlled environment, I don't think it has an effect that matters at all. It is not the same, but no screens are. Like, I think most professionals actually don't need to work. Like if they're working in the Apple ecosystem, I think people can just trust their screens, really. Like unless something's wrong with your screen, they are generally close enough that what you see is what everybody else is going to get. And part of that is just because iPhones are so common and they are sort of calibrated to the same standard. They're not identical, but I only think people need to be looking at like a calibrated reference monitor. If you're at a certain budget level, you'll have a certain type of distribution that requires like, okay, Coke Red needs to look like Coke Red and you got to hit that Pantone target. But generally it's like, look, if you're just like trying to make something cinematic and vibey, who cares if it's 1 degree off on most computers when, that's not the key thing about your actual final production. So when you need that level of accuracy, you need a much more expensive calibrated monitor anyway. So the difference between glossy and matte, that's not the difference that matters. The difference is like further down the line, you got to spend $10,000 on your display anyway, and make sure that it's calibrated every week. Otherwise, just don't worry about it. Look at it on your iPhone and look at it on your MacBook, and between the two, you'll know what everybody else is going to see.
Yeah, I feel like actually the nano texture might be in its best place when it's on a laptop as well, because like I said, my machine's closed 95% of the time connected to another display. And the times when I am using it might be on a train or, on the sofa or whatever, when I will be in non-ideal lighting.
Yeah, I love it for that. And I also love, so I didn't review the Mac Minis, but I'm very excited about them. I think it's like we're at the time where it's like, wow, I feel like this could be a very popular computer, both because the entry model is so good now with 16 gigs of RAM, way more recommendable, to anybody that, if your friend is like, which Mac should I get? You can recommend the base model much more easily now. And I've also been seeing that it looks like if you want to dig into it and you want to put some work in, maybe the SSDs could be user replaceable as well, in a way they weren't before, which most people aren't going to want to put that effort in, but they were never upgradable. So, that could really be cool.
I think that machine, if I was recommending a desktop for someone, I would recommend that because it looks amazing. It performs amazingly, I imagine. And like once you're on the M4 Pro, for a lot of video work, you wouldn't need the Mac, so you wouldn't need to go to a studio.
Yeah, no.
A Mac studio.
The Pro got its jump this year. Last year, the Max had its bigger bump forward, and the Pro stayed a little behind. This year, the Pro has really come forward and caught up in a lot of ways. So, I think it's very safe to go with the Pro, which more people, I mean, I reviewed the Max because that's what I always want to see, like, how far can I push the absolute best that's out there? But, a lot of people listening to this, the Pro is the place to be, like you could even get by on just the regular M4 for the style of editing that we were just discussing. If you're just cutting clips one after the other, like, you do not need anything more than an M4. With an M4 Pro, you can also start layering on effects and you'll still be comfortable pretty much all the time.
Yeah, and I think with storage as well, I've got a 4 terabyte SSD because I run a load of my jobs internally and like to have the last few jobs there. But if I was running a desktop and always working in pretty much the same spot every day, I think the internal storage is just a bit less important, because especially with Thunderbolt 5, you could have a Thunderbolt 5 SSD connected and you can run it. I think I've seen them advertise that they can run at 6,000, megabits a second or whatever it is, gigabits, I can't remember what. But basically very close to the internal speed of the internal drive. So, if you need to, you can just have an SSD hooked up the whole time. Yeah, so that Mac Mini, I mean, it just looks amazing as well. I love it.
Yeah, well, the cute design helps too. And, that it's pretty loaded with ports. It's going to have everything you need. Like, I just want to always bring up how happy I am with the lineup of Macs right now, because I keep remembering, especially right around when I started YouTubing, that I was like, man, I'm just kind of sick of the Mac lineup. Like, I was looking at PCs. I was thinking, I'm like, well, I'll always prefer the Mac for my general lifestyle, but maybe I just need a really fast PC for my video editing. Like, I just need a machine that I load up with big GPUs and tons of RAM. And that, we are just so far from that right now. Like, there are no PC laptops that I could recommend to anybody. I mean, for any reason, unless you're just running Microsoft Office all day, the laptop world is just dominated by Apple right now. Like, they are the best at any price point except the lowest. Like, unless you just need a Chromebook style computer, anything where you need a little bit of power, I'd recommend a Mac for sure.
I think as well, the position that the Macs are in at the moment, there is no bad option. There's no computer with a load of caveats. Like, that even fairly recently, there used to be the entry level MacBook Pro was basically a MacBook Air in the case of a MacBook Pro, and you didn't really get much more. But now you get the extra port, you get the screen, like the XDR screen on it. There's really, like, I think they've just sort of, everything's fallen into a really nice place.
Yeah, no, I'd say an amazing place. I absolutely love the lineup right now. But there'll be more about it to come soon. And Thomas, thanks again for coming on. Where can people find you online? I keep seeing your name and hoping people follow you, but remind us.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Thomas G. Carter. You can find all my work at trimediting.com, along with everyone else who I work with. And I'm sure I'll be popping up on any other Twitter clones that...
Well, and around the time this video posts, I'll also be at the Final Cut Pro Summit in California, which I've never been to before. I know you've been. You won't be there this year, I think, but...
Yeah, I presented there I think the first year I did a presentation, which some of the presentations that are online were sort of versions of what I did at that first Creative Summit. It's a great event. Yeah, and I'll be excited. I don't know if your talk's going to be available online, but I'd be excited to see that, because
it's kind of the stuff I was talking about earlier and how I do that workflow for commercial clients, like the shot on iPhone to Final Cut pipeline. But it's a bit of a Q&A, so it won't be, which is great for me because it means I have to do less homework and I can just kind of have my knowledge going into it. And then I've learned a lot from, like the talks that you did in the past, and just being around other expert editors and people that work in your field and are better than you is always something that helps push me forward anyway. So very excited about it. And thanks again.